Hey everyone. Um, these are our volunteer beekeepers, Charles and Gordon. You want to say a few things about yourself and how long you've been
Sure.
beekeeping?
Sophia, I've been keeping bees for 33 years. And almost half of that time, I hadn't thought about it until recently. I've been the volunteer beekeeper here at the JCRA Arboretum. I got involved in beekeeping because of my love for sourwood honey. And if you're familiar with that honey, not everybody will tell you the truth about sourwood honey. They'll try to sell you other products at a premium price and swear it's sourwood. So I decided to become a beekeeper myself. And in 2006, I had just been elected president of the State Beekeepers Association. And we were having a meeting here at the Arboretum, and I walked through the garden and just happened to walk into Dr. Denny Warner's office and asked him, says, "What kind of place you run here? You can't have a first class." And he looked up and said, "And who are you?" And I said, "Well, let me finish." I said, "You can't have a first class Arboretum with no honeybees." I said, "I saw gnats, wasps, hornets, everything, but no honeybees." And he sort of grinned and showed me his pad of things he wanted to do that year. And getting honeybees was the top of that list. And I've been very happy ever since. This is, in my opinion, the best bee yard in the world. There's something in bloom every day of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sophia, I'm Gordon, and I've been keeping honeybees since about 2008. I've gardened most of my life, and I had a pollination problem. So I said, I need some pollinators. And so I went out and got my first honeybees, and they've become kind of a hobby on their own. And I've helped Charles out here some kind of last couple of years. And now I'm a little bit more involved with him this year with having some hives out here as well to make sure we are able to pollinate all the flowers, improve the seeds, and to have them make this a nicer place to be. So
Yeah, and that brings up a point I wanted to incorporate in. The bees help with the pollination of plants, and that helps with making production of seeds. So I guess when we were speaking briefly, you brought up.
Well, the reason that Dr. Warner wanted to get honeybees is that he was starting a seed exchange with other arboretum around the world.
Yeah.
And he realized, that other pollinators do a good job, but the honeybee is the workhorse of pollination, primarily because there's so many of them in a hive. In a typical colony in the summer at its full strength, you've got 60,000 honeybees, and so they can do a lot of good. And in order to have viable seeds, most plants need external pollination. So that's where the honeybees come in.
That's cool. You brought up something that I've always wondered about, and that's, so when something's labeled clover or sourwood honey, how do they know? Like, how is that a marketing thing? Do they actually keep the bees in a clover field? Like, is there a dome?
Sophia, we don't have enough time this afternoon to explain that problem. But I will say this, most of the honey that you buy in a grocery store is mislabeled. Most of it.
You heard it here first.
The only way to get pure honey that's labeled properly is to go to a farmer's market and buy it from a farmer, somebody who has their own bees and their place. The way that you can segregate honey by the source of the nectar is essentially, to whatever you want to do, put clean wax on when that plant is at its peak blooming, and the bees, only go to that. For example, in order to get sourwood honey from the mountains, which is still a premium honey in North Carolina, we know that it blooms from the last week in June to the third week of July. And there's nothing else in bloom usually at that time. And so you put clean wax on at the beginning of the sourwood season and take it off at the end, and you've got sourwood honey.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Now, clover honey is probably the most common honey in the world, and if it's blooming, the bees are going to go to it, and so they will blend it with whatever else you got to.
So that's
it's not a bad honey, but it's not unique.
Right. Yeah, I always love going to the farmer's market and seeing I haven't been in a long time, but the different colors,
Oh yeah.
and they'll always give you tastes. And the dark, what's the dark honey?
The dark honey in this area is usually tulip poplar
Okay.
from the big tree.
Yeah.
And that's the most prolific source of honey in North Carolina.
Interesting.
As an example, it usually takes bees to visit 100 or more plants to fill up their honey stomach, ordinarily. There's enough nectar in one tulip poplar bloom for 40 bees. So if you're a lazy bee, you say, I don't want to go to all those 100 plants, I'll just go to the tulip poplar, get a load, come home.
I just went, I don't know what's happening.
There are some other darker honey as well. There's some people, buckwheat gives a very dark honey as well. And I know some people, they'll put a 5-acre field of buckwheat out there, and that gets pretty dark honey.
Yeah,
I
think buckwheat is what I'm thinking of.
Most of the honey we label wildflower because you really don't know its source, or or maybe a lot of different sources for it. So you call it wildflower. But
go ahead.
The bees like it here at the Arboretum.
It's wonderful.
Today the hives are doing extremely well. They're bringing a lot of pollen this time of year because they're trying to get ready for the winter time. They're filling up the hives with honey, and they're trying to get their queen and the bees ready to go through the winter. The thing I get amazed at in the wintertime, they say that even in the wintertime, the area in the hive around the queen is kept at 90 degrees.
I've heard that.
And it's just, I didn't believe that, but if you take a little heat, that's the thing where they do the heat thing, you see the different colors of the heat on there, you can see that it's very hot wherever the queen is in the hive.
Yeah, and I've seen that in when they get into a house, and they'll go in with the heat maps, and you see them in the walls.
Now, there's something different about the JCRA Arboretum. There's something in bloom here every day of the year.
Yes.
There can be snow and ice on the ground, and I get a complaint from my bees because they say, "Why do we have to work in the winter? Everybody else takes the winter off, but there's something for us to go get, so we're going to go get it." Yeah. I was up here one year there was snow and ice on the ground. We had just had a state meeting, and the editor of Bee Culture magazine, one of the leading bee magazines in the country, couldn't get back home, so he spent the night with me. And then we invited Dr. Tarpick, the big bee guy over at the university we celebrate, to come out. And there was literally snow and ice on the Arboretum. And he heard a buzzing. He said, the bees are not supposed to be out working this time of year. And he went over, and there was a Japanese prune tree, and the bees were just saturated in it, bringing the nectar in the middle of the winter.
That's crazy. So is there a temperature where they go to, where they won't come out? I noticed this morning.
Yeah. If it typically, if it gets below the 40s, they'll stay inside. But once it gets above 40s and sunny, they'll break cluster and come out. And so we have a lot of warm days in the wintertime. So here you find lots of days where the honeybees are out because it's 45, 50, 60 and sunny. They'll come out in the wintertime.
And one thing that's big that I hear a lot about is there's a big focus on native pollinators. And how do the honeybees interact with the native pollinators?
Well, the honeybees are not native to North America.
Yeah.
The Pilgrims brought them over. And the Native Americans call the honeybees white man's fly. And they brought a few colonies over, and very quickly they had spread all the way to the West Coast. But they've established themselves now, so you might as well call them natives because they've been here longer than many of us. But the honeybee is a very docile, gentle creature until you disturb her. And then she will take charge of that. But they're not predatory on other pollinators. They mind their own business.
Yeah, a lot of the native pollinators are, they don't live in hives. They'll live singly by themselves in the ground or in trees and stuff. And their lives aren't long. They'll live 3 or 4 weeks, and so they can't pollinate the vast number of things that the honeybees can pollinate. So when you really need things pollinated, you need to bring in masses like honeybees to effectively get your pollination. Bumblebees do a good job as well, but their hives are much smaller than the honeybee.
Yeah, and like you were saying with the every day of the year, I feel like that makes a lot of sense because the honeybees can kind of wake up and come out when it's warm, whereas the native,
Right.
a lot of the native pollinators that are solitary may not come back out
Right.
Well, actually,
in the winter.
take the bumblebee, for example. Only the queen survives the winter.
Okay.
And then when spring comes, she lays eggs and will produce a new colony. And the colony is only, what, 50 to
50.
80?
Yeah, right. There aren't that many.
The bumblebees, not that many. And then only the queen survives that winter. In the case of the honeybee, the typical colony will build up to about 60,000 in the late spring. And you've got that workforce during most of the summer. And then they die back, and the queen will raise a new cohort of about 20,000 that takes her through the wintertime. So you've got them ready to go early in the spring.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we've got we've got a display hive actually. It might be a good time to look at that.
Yeah.
We're kind of talking about the life cycle.
Yeah, we have an observation hive here, which is one frame for one of the hives. And this is a brood frame, which means this is where the babies have been laid and born. And these are primarily worker brood. The worker brood take 21 days to hatch. The queen will lay eggs in here, a little small, little thin white thing, a couple centimeters long. And it'll be there for 3 days. On day 3, it hatches, becomes larvae, and you can see some larvae in there if you're up closer. And then these sealed on top, these are like the cocoons. And so on day 9, they seal them over the top, and the bees are in there with their face out. They spin their cocoon in there, and they do a complete metamorphosis. And then in 21 days, the worker bee will chew off the outside layer and crawl out. And that's the life cycle for the honeybees. And a healthy hive will have brood, or here in North Carolina, will have some brood in there almost all year long. There might be a short time in December, early January, well, December where there's not much, but I find brood almost in a healthy hive almost all year round. It gets smaller amount in the wintertime, but there's still always some there. They're trying to build up for the wintertime, so they have the workforce to get them through the winter.
That's fascinating.
So the queen, of course, is the most important member of the colony, such as you are in your household.
Of course.
And the main reason for that, her main job is to lay eggs. A good, healthy queen will lay 2,000 eggs a day. And that is needed in order to sustain the colony during the wintertime. She also controls the mood of the colony by pheromones. When she puts out the pheromone, it says, I'm a healthy queen and I'm going to be here for a while. The workers are calm and they go about their business. And they communicate by pheromones, like that. One thing that, one question I get more often than anything else is, how often do you get stung? And how do you avoid getting stung? Especially school kids ask this question. I say that I only get stung when I want to. Bee stings are good for arthritis. So when you get old and your joints don't work like they used to, you can go get a bee sting, and for a couple of weeks, you don't feel any pain from the arthritis. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't recommend that to just anybody.
Now, is that because you're...
That's actually a secret that us beekeepers need to hang on to. But our bees that we have in the Arboretum are gentle. We don't like mean bees.
Okay,
And,
so you only brought us the nicest bees.
Well,
That's right.
actually...
Well, it's because you're so nice here that they're nice.
Okay.
The Arboretum's a nice place, so therefore they're nice bees.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier, but down in the nursery, I've got a puddle in one of the houses. There's a low spot and there's gravel, and it's right in the entranceway. And there are bees. There's like a crazy amount of bees on the ground drinking, and they've been there every day for a couple weeks now, which makes sense because it's been so dry. But
well, they bring back several things in the hive. They bring back water, they bring back nectar, they bring back pollen, and they also bring back propolis from the sap from the trees and that kind of stuff to make their sticky stuff to kind of seal up holes and all. So they bring several things back to the hive, and water, a source of water is very important to have a healthy hive.
But to the point of them being docile, like it's right in my walkway, and I walk through and they buzz up, and I've yet to be stung.
Well, the nature of the honeybee is that unless you disturb her home,
Right. Right.
she's not defensive. When she goes out to gather nectar, that's the only thing on her mind. Now, if you happen to pick up a bee and mash her, she'll sting you.
Right.
Or if you inadvertently put pressure on her, whatever, she'll react to it. But unless you disturb them in the colony, they won't react.
Yeah.
And if they are, sometimes we do have aggressive bees. And the solution to that is you just change upper management. You replace the queen. And in 30 days, you have an entirely different temperament.
They do. That's right. Yeah. I don't know if anybody is interested in how they can help support the honeybees or not, from that standpoint. But if they, you can put pollinator gardens out there, and you can add flowers, which pollinators like to come, honeybees or other things, to your yard. Those around you are out in the, in the fields and stuff to help improve the this source of good nutrients and good food for not just the honeybees, but for all pollinators.
Yeah, and I've heard, I think Mark talking about the number one thing, like really early in the season, is actually like maples and some other trees.
The first thing that blooms in North Carolina is the red maple.
Yeah.
And it blooms, if we've got a warm winter, they'll start blooming in late January, but they're in full bloom by early February. And the story we like to tell is that when the workers go out during the winter and there's nothing there, they just come back in and eat honey that has been stored.
Right.
But when they go out and that red maple starts blooming, they come back and tell the queen, "Hey, mother, there's work to be done. We need help." So she starts laying eggs to build up the colony so that when the spring flow really comes, there's plenty of workers. Yeah. So that's a trigger that inspires the queen to start looking for the spring building. And then after that, you've got the holly and all of the other trees, the tulip poplar and the various flowers.
So, and that brings up another thing that I like to tell people about is the being really aware of your seasons and when things are flowering when you're spraying pesticides. Right. I would often get asked while I was working in landscaping to spray roses for Japanese beetles while the roses were in full bloom. Yeah. And I would kindly say no.
Yeah. But the rose is not a major source of honey.
Right.
And as long as you have other plants nearby that do provide a lot of nectar, they generally don't go to the rose. But anyway, I discourage folks from using pesticides.
Yeah. What one of the recommendations we make is if you are going to use pesticides, do it towards the end of the day when it's dusk, because then the spray would dry before the bees come out the next morning to go on there. So you have less of a likelihood of the honeybees and other pollinators picking it up. And we never recommend dusting, because the dust can attach to the bees and bring it back, and they can kill the bees in the hive or any pollinator, quite honestly. So if you're going to use pesticides, use sprays, maybe granulars, but do it at dusk is when you would apply it, not during the heat of the day when the pollinators or other bees might be out and about. Yeah. That's the general guideline.
And read the label.
Right.
Yeah, read the label.
Always read the label.
Right.
It says I know it's long,
when in doubt,
but
read the label.
Everything you need to know.
Right. Yeah. Now there's there's a lot of, they talk about stress for the honeybees these days, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of reasons why there might be stress. But one of the reasons is, we've changed the way we do farming, and we used to have family farms, small fields, a lot of hedgerows with a lot of wildflowers and stuff. Now we have these massive farms for specialization, and that changes what's available to the pollinators and honeybees that are out and about. And then because of specialization, something like the almond crop, the almonds, 80% of all the almonds in the world are grown in Northern California, and they take 1.2 million hives out there in the wintertime. So we're transporting bees across the country. So you have enough bees out there to pollinate the almond crop, otherwise you won't get the almonds. And then they take them back and they'll take them to the blueberries or take them to the cranberries. So we move and transport them around the country a lot. That's a little bit different environment than what they're used to.
Yeah, for sure. Mark brought up, this week he was talking, checking in with me about this program, and said I should ask you when we had our honey examined, what they found?
A few years ago, I sent my honey off for an analysis. And at that time, there was a professor at Texas A&M that was the world's leading forensic examiner of that. He had examined the Dead Sea Scrolls to determine what flowers and shrubbery was blooming at the time the scrolls were written. And that's how good he was. And he tested for 36 different types of pollen. And the honey I sent it from here tested positive for 35 of them. The only thing absent was basswood, which grows in the mountains. Plus, there were 6 different types of pollen in my sample here he could not identify.
Oh, wow.
And he was the world's leading expert on pollen analysis.
That's cool.
At that point. At that time, there was a huge row of holly from this edge of the arboretum all the way down to the other. And I knew that holly was going to be the predominant source of nectar. It was not. It was, I think, 5% of that. And there was nothing over 7%. It was just such a diverse variety. And one of the surprising things, which Dr. Ambrose, the professor of beekeeping at that time, laughed at, one of the surprising things was that the family of poison ivy showed up as a heavy source.
Yeah. Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I wonder if it was just was it just the genus, or I don't know. I don't know. Can we find that out? I don't know. Now I'm curious.
But this is really a wonderful bee yard. I consider myself fortunate to have put bees here.
Yeah, and we have 3 hives over there now?
5.
As a matter of fact, we've got 250,000 little girls running around doing work here in your pollinating garden.
Wow.
250,000.
That is so. You've brought up a couple of times. You've mentioned quantities like that. How do you count? Is it per?
Very careful.
So 1 by 1. Y'all are you in here like 24/7?
No. We know how many bees are on a frame like that. It's 5,000.
Something like that.
And so if you've got, they can multiply your frames by 5,000, and that tells you. But a typical frame, a typical bee colony in the spring at full strength is 60,000 bees. We just know. And,
It's just
and then your cluster will shrink in the wintertime and stay at about 20,000. That's what's necessary to keep them queen alive.
I think one of the other things interesting about honeybees is in the springtime and summer when they're foraging, they last 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
In the wintertime, the same bee can last 4 to 5 months.
Right.
Because they aren't doing as much foraging, so they can stay the longer. So they've done some studies, and they say the bees that are being put together now for the wintertime might have a little bit different makeup than the ones in the springtime. And they're going to last 4 or 5 months to get them through the winter, because you can't make new babies in the wintertime. So they've got to go from now. The ones being delayed now have to make it till February, March time frame.
Okay. That's
The typical worker bee only lives 6 weeks. When she's first born, she's a housekeeper for 2 weeks. And then after that, there's a graduation ceremony. And she becomes a nurse bee. And she takes care of the babies for 2 weeks. And then after that, there's another graduation ceremony, sort of kicking out, for example. And there's such a terrific division of labor. That last 2 weeks, they become foragers mostly, or guard bees. And those are the ones that will sting you if you disturb their habitat.
okay.
Then some bring in nectar, some bring in water, propolis. And then they die. They literally work themselves to death. That's what happened in 6 weeks.
That's a lot. That's a fast turnaround.
And that's why it's important for the queen to be able to lay 2,000 eggs a day to sustain the colony.
And what's the process to get a new queen? Because I know I hear
That's a good question.
stuff like that.
All right. Commercial beekeepers and good beekeepers like Gordon, they will actually replace their queen. I have never replaced a queen in the colony. They take care of it themselves. Here's what happened. When the queen can no longer lay a number of bees to keep the colony alive, the queen pheromone gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And the worker bees sense that. And so they just decide to replace the queens. And the way that happens is that these cells here, when the queen lays an egg, every egg gets a substance called royal jelly for 3 days. If it's going to be a new queen, the workers have created a larger cell about the size of a peanut, and they fill that cell completely up with royal jelly. And that's what enables that larva to fully develop and become a queen. And then when they'll lay 3 or 4 queen cells at a time, maybe half a dozen. And the first one that emerges goes out and kills the others. And then when that queen becomes mated and starts laying eggs, and she puts out a strong queen pheromone, then the workers kill their mother.
That's brutal.
They literally show her up and say, "Sorry, lady, it's time to go."
There's a new queen in
That's
There's a
town.
new queen in town.
That's
Wow.
the nature of
Yep.
beekeeping.
That
Yeah.
is.
You didn't want to hear
Fascinating.
that story, did you?
No, I did. I think nature is fascinating and brutal sometimes.
The worker bees are female as well as the queen. The drones are the male. The difference between the worker bee and the queen is a fully mature female. The worker bees are not fully mature. They never mature like the queen bee because they don't get all the enrichment with the royal jelly, and they don't they develop differently.
And the drones, so the drones are male. What do the drones do? Where are they? Where do they live?
Here's the thing. I usually, when I give this presentation to kids at school, I say, the drones don't do anything but lay around, eat honey in the morning, and in the afternoon go out to try to find a girlfriend. And I said, the workers do all the work. Now, who wants to be a girl bee and do all the work, or who wants to be a boy bee? Everybody raised their hand and want to be a boy bee. I said, well, there's another part to that story. I said, if they succeeding in finding a girlfriend, they die right then.
Yeah.
And if they don't die right then, in the wintertime, the girls kick them out and the birds eat them, or they die then. And I said, now who wants to be a boy bee?
Oh,
Nobody wants to be a boy.
nobody wants to be a boy.
The only purpose of the drone is to make the queen.
Okay.
And in a typical colony, there'll be 200 or 300 drones, and the rest are workers, except for
Now, see, they kick out the drones in the wintertime because they don't want to feed them. They don't have to feed them because they
that's
aren't.
nature.
Yeah.
It's
It's a lot. That's a lot of food.
I'm sure there are a lot of women in our society would like to do that too. Getting back to the queen, she's the most important member of the colony, and commercial beekeepers usually replace their queen every 2 years in order to have strong hives. So one of the emphasis of Dr. Tarpey at the university is to teach beekeepers how to raise good queens. And so that's a thriving industry, as you can imagine, is to be able to raise good queens.
So how do you raise queens? What is that process
Have you done
look
that,
like?
Gordon?
Not other than letting them raise them.
Well, you actually, it's a sort of a complicated process.
It is.
You've got devices where you can actually have artificial queen cells. And you can basically find eggs less than 3 days old, transport them into your queen cells, and put that little strip up in a regular, what we call a breeder nuke, and the worker bees will take care of it. And you can raise 20 to 30 bees, queens at a time, like that. And you keep track of it, and the day before she's to hatch out, you can take it, put those queen cells in other colonies, or let them go ahead and emerge, and then put them in another nuke, and when you're sure they're mated, put them in a cage and sell them.
Yeah.
And you could order bees in the mail if you need the replacements.
I'm picturing like a cartoon with like just bees coming out of the boxes in circle.
When I first started keeping bees, I would order queens through the mail from a guy down in Goldsboro. He'd mail them to me. And so the post office called and said, Mr. Goeking, you've got something here you need to come pick up at the post office. And I go, what's that? I go, well, we think it's some honeybees.
The mail carriers are not happy with them. But
I
actually,
bet not.
the beekeepers had to get a law passed to require them to carry it.
Oh my god.
Like if you manage them properly, they're harmless.
Yeah.
I went out there in my base just like this a while ago.
Yeah.
No problem.
So, we're docile little creatures.
Yep, they are indeed.
I think the honeybee is God's most noble creature.
Yeah,
She is truly a delight.
amazing.
She requires very little of us. She's so generous to give us. I mean, if it weren't for the honeybees, we would not have 1/3 of all the food we eat.
Yeah,
And then a lot of the rest of it would be improperly developed.
yeah. Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about honeybees, both Charles and I are part of the Wake County Beekeepers Association. A lot of the counties in North Carolina have their own chapter from the North Carolina State Beekeepers. So you can look up us or other chapters and kind of get involved in that if you want to learn more about it, how to be a beekeeper yourself. That's one way to kind of find out information.
And we do a school every spring to teach new beekeepers how to become beekeepers. And we've got 400 members in our Wake County chapter.
Wow.
We're the largest chapter in the state.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, we do have,
questions?
a question. There was one question that I saw online. I'm not too sure what a bee bath is, but
What?
I said I'm not too sure what a bee bath is, but somebody said, should you be adding sugar to water in a bee bath?
I think that's like a bird bath, but for bees.
Okay.
If you're going to mix, if you're going to feed the bees this time, you use the ratio of 4-to-1, don't you?
Well, you
Or 1-to-1.
a 2-part sugar to 1-part water is what
Yeah,
we're doing right now.
Two parts sugar,
Right.
1 part water. But if you do it in a bee bath,
Yeah,
you're going to attract yellow jackets,
Right.
hornets, ants, and probably bad neighbors.
yeah.
Yeah.
A bee bath is a good source of water for them. If you need to feed the bees, we usually put it in a container and put it in the hive or outside the hive in a jar or something. And that's a mixture of sugar and water to kind of help build up their supplies for the wintertime.
Yeah, I've only ever heard of bee baths being mostly for the water, not for the sugar.
And somebody was asking how many hives we have at the Arboretum. I know y'all said we had 5, but they also asked how much honey is produced over what time frame. So let's just say over the course of a year, how much do we get here?
It depends on the strength of the colony. I had one colony that survived here for 12 years. I never replaced the queen. They swarmed every year, and I never caught a swarm. Because when they land on the top of these loblolly pines, I get called and I said, do me a favor, go out there and wave goodbye to them. I'm not crawling up in that tree. But that particular colony produced 100 pounds of honey every year for 12 years.
Wow.
And that's not unusual for a good, strong
Right.
colony to do. Now, I've got a very small colony this year that came from a swarm. It didn't produce any honey. And I may actually have to feed it some during the wintertime.
Yeah, it varies widely from no honey to 100 pounds of honey you can get or so per hive. It just really varies year to year from hive to hive.
I would mention, I don't sell honey. I give half of it back to the Arboretum and the rest of it to my family and friends. So I have a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And harvest.
Oh, I had a question, and I was going to ask. Oh, how do you know how much to take out? Because the honey is their food source, right?
Right.
Generally, in our normally mild climate in North Carolina, although we have some severe winter days, we will leave one super, that's one box of honey, about 45, 50 pounds. And that's generally enough.
So if you're having 2 or 3 supers on 2 or 3 hives on boxes on top of the hive, you might take 2 of them off if they're full of honey and leave 1 for them. We always like to be conservative and leave more honey than they might need, just to be safe on the sure side, because you don't know what's going to happen in the coming months relative to their availability of resources. So it's better to leave them a little bit more than normal. But we look in the wintertime, we're looking to have them have 40 to 60 pounds of honey in each hive as they're going into the winter right now. So we can count the frames of honey and the frame. If this was full of honey right now, you've got 6 pounds of honey. So if you had about 8 of those in a hive, you would have more than enough honey to get them through the winter. So So our goal is to not take more than they need to survive the summer or go into the winter. So
Right.
that's a little bit of a guess how much to take off, but we try to be conservative and leave more than they need.
Somebody's asking if you could tell us about blue and purple honey.
Well, what I can tell you is there's articles in the paper this week about blue and purple honey, and you can read them in the News and Observer talking about it. And it's some of the people claim that it's unique to North Carolina. It's blue down by the coast and purple by the mountains. The article, I actually read those articles this week, and they don't. They're unable to clarify what causes it. I think Dr. Tarpey said that maybe the high content of aluminum in the nectar may help to make them have some color to them, but the actual source is really not clearly articulated. The general view from all those articles is that North Carolina is a unique place where they have some of that, but it's not from a particular blueberry or a purple grape. It's something else that's causing that. And you can go, Google the News and Observer this past week. They had 2 articles on the blue and purple honey.
One of our state inspectors was called out years ago to check a complaint from a beekeeper that was reporting red honey. And before he looked in the hive, he looked over and he says, "Let's go over and check that Dairy Queen out first." And they went over to the trash cans of the Dairy Queen, and there were the honeybees eating the syrup from the leftover. So that explained. That happens at times.
Okay. Great. Well, it looks like there aren't any more questions coming in online. So I'd like to thank you, Charles. I'd like to thank you, Gordon, for coming out and talking with us today about bees. And of course, thank you, Sophia, for leading the conversation. You did a great job, and we really appreciated you carrying us through this. And thank you to everybody who joined us at home. I appreciate all the comments letting me know about the audio. We will look into that for future editions of this program. So please join us next week it'll be the beginning of October. So we're going to be doing October gardening tasks. So that'll be a good one. So please tune in for that. Thanks again for coming out. Y'all take care.
Thank y'all.